Mushrooms and Me. This is our first podcast where expectations are low for how well we perform today. Okay. But I'm Sam Gross.
Holly Fleischer.
We are co-founders of Mushrooms and Me. We are facilitators, psilocybin facilitators in Bend, Oregon. And we are super excited to have our friend Steve Boswell with us today. We went through psilocybin training together, and then we've become good friends since then. So thank you for being our guinea pig
Yeah,
on
thanks for having
launching
me.
this. Yeah, great. So let's get into the questions. We really want to know about your personal journey with psilocybin and what inspired you to become a facilitator.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey because I'd tried mushrooms in the past, but more in a recreational capacity. Having some chocolate hit a party or having some mushrooms before a show and getting the visuals and all that kind of fun stuff, but never really did a lot of thinking about what it actually is. And I got to know the folks here in Ashland that run the service center, and they've become really good friends. And in conversations with them, and it's all been kind of serendipitous, actually, how it's all happened. And when I talk to people in the community, it all seems to be like a time comes and you're now you're in the community, and the mushrooms call to you or whatever. I don't want to get too mystical about it, but it was a synchronicity of events that happened where I was laid off from my corporate 9-to-5 job. I happened to be in Oregon, living in Oregon, where we've decided that we want to legalize the use of psilocybin in a therapeutic context. My neighbors and good friends are in the business already, so they own a service center here in Ashland. I read Michael Pollan's book. All these things were kind of this confluence of events that happened where I said, I think I need to pay more attention to this. And I enrolled in the same class that you guys took with me. Since then, I've done an actual journey dose a couple of times. I would say that it's the most profound experience of my life. And it seems to be a common theme from those that I've talked to that have done the same. And since then, I've actually facilitated several journeys, and that feedback continues to kind of resonate across the board. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Have you found any personal benefits to the journeys you've had so far?
100% yes. So I think the thing that I still kind of process on a regular basis, and that's come through in my journeys, is that this notion of being a beacon of positivity to other people is something that continues to be a message that comes loud and clear to me. And what's interesting is I've had people that I've reported to in the past in my different careers that have had similar feedback. And so I'm taking that to heart. And I've talked to some old friends recently, and she was interested because she said that my whole disposition and my kind of stance in the world has changed. And she said it's a noticeable change.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So,
I bet that felt great.
yeah. And I think, I just feel more at ease with who I am and why I'm here than I ever have before.
Oh, that's so good to hear. I love that.
That's a peaceful feeling, and I definitely can relate to that feeling of feeling at ease with why you're here, and just the peace that surrounds living that way. It is kind of incredible because even as a person who felt like I had purpose for being in this world before, it was more that I knew that, and now I feel that. And it does completely change the way you respond to the people in your life and the world around you, even in subtle ways that you may not recognize, but others seem to pick up on. And
I think you start to hang out, or you not hang out, but you start to encounter other people that accept you. And I think part of where I want to go with my practice is really helping people that have been traumatized by corporate America, frankly, because the whole way corporate America works is it sets goals and does things to people that are really uncomfortable and
Mhm.
a lot of times don't align with people's core beliefs or core ways of being. And I think we're forced to conform in those systems, and it creates a lot of tension and it creates a lot of kind of atypical behavior, frankly.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so they become very toxic environments because everyone in those environments is feeling like this is not the way that we should be in this world. And so that's been a big insight for me is I know I can never go back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, at least at least in the same capacity that I was working in the past.
Yeah,
Right.
I can relate to that. Although I wasn't in corporate America, I was a serial entrepreneur, and so I did the things that were being done to. I did those things to myself, and like workaholic,
Yeah.
sacrificing personal life, and you know, living with anxiety all the time and the weight of all of that. And now that I've pivoted into this, life just feels so much better.
Mhm. What's that
So,
Radiohead song or that line from a Radiohead song? I think it's "You do it to yourself, and that's why it really hurts."
Uh,
mm.
oh, I need to listen to that song.
Yeah, it's on the Bends, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know that you'd be willing to facilitate anybody that wanted to work with you that was seeking a journey. But you mentioned wanting to work with corporate professionals. And earlier before the recording started, you mentioned in the arts as well.
Mhm.
So do you want to take a minute to just kind of explain that initiative and what's on your heart?
Yeah, I think so. I've worked in the creative industry for the last 15 to 20 years, working with designers and technologists and all that stuff. And the lived experience of being in that industry and how it plugs into larger corporations is that the people that are maybe more on the creative side of the brain really struggle in those environments. And that's been consistent in every place that I've worked. And I would emotional carnage is a strong word, but the emotional impact it's had on people I know and care about in that business is pretty profound.
Mhm.
And so I think, you know, this has been pretty revelatory for me, and I think I should be helping others um, deal with that experience because
Mhm.
it's a very consistent day to day load, cognitive and emotional load that people are working under, and I think that creates a
Mhm.
lot of unhealthy anti patterns. So I want to help them
Mhm.
with that. So that's that side of it. Um, I'm also interested in how um, psilocybin works with the brain to kind of forge new connections. And I think you can enhance creativity significantly
Mhm.
just from that kind of creating these new neural pathways. And so I'm
Mhm.
interested not only from a corporate trauma perspective, but helping people unlock kind of their creativity. Or what I've found, at least with psilocybin, is for people that are trying to unlock creativity, they get so focused and anxious about it. The journey usually shows them something else and tells them, it's not worth worrying about. And that becomes its own kind of unlock moment.
Mhm. Mhm. And I really love that you mention and bring in the idea of creative energy into the corporate world because oftentimes when people think about creative energy and creativity, they think that that's simply, the arts, whether you're a painter or a crafter or, something along those lines. But really, creative energy is all, all sorts
All
of it's
humankind.
all, yeah, exactly. And, idea generation and all sorts of ways. And so I love that you want to put a focus on that because there is a lot of data that and feedback from journeyers that show they're performing not only more efficiently at work, ideas are coming to them, they're feeling a lighter, like their load is a bit lighter when they're at work just from a single journey. And
I
imagine
think
the productivity in you know their their lives or the lives of employees who journeyed, you'd think even that head professionals at these companies would probably want to participate.
Yeah, I think a lot of blockages are actually anxieties that people hold. So
Mm-hmm.
they tend to block off certain parts of their personalities or themselves in a corporate context, or in almost any context, because there's a fear of being seen as not
Mm-hmm.
smart or having a terrible idea or any of those types of things. So I think a lot of those blockages are a series of events in life where that blockage just continues to build up.
Mm-hmm.
What I find with psilocybin is it helps remove a lot of those blockages.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks for sharing your passion with
Yeah.
us. Yeah, that's really wonderful. Let's go back to when we met. So we signed up for this class. It
Mhm.
was 2 days a week on a Zoom call with Travis and Marcy, who were amazing. And then a couple weekend practicums at the end of that, where we really got to know each other. Tell us about your experience with the training that we went through.
Yeah,
And
I
is there
mean,
anything that you carry over with you into your practice now?
yeah, sure. I think going in, I I would say my expectations were low to medium
Okay.
on what I would get out of it. I just felt it was one of those things I had to go through as part of
Mm-hmm.
the process. But having worked with them and our group, it went from low to medium to high. Like the foundation that they laid for us in terms of the historical context, the scientific context, the medical context, all of those various building blocks of why this stuff's important was extremely helpful. And I feel like I learned an enormous amount of very relevant information in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think what was most effective, I felt, was with the practicums, how they were able to tie everything all together. Everything tied all together from a learning perspective, an experiential perspective, etc. Like it all just coalesced around those practicum moments.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're doing, I think, is a bit different from what I've seen from some of the other training companies. And I I have just a tremendous amount of respect for the two of them and the course that they've pulled together and the amount of knowledge I was able to receive through that process.
Yeah, I agree. They really are fantastic educators, very gifted educators.
Hmm.
Um, they have knowledge and skills that complement each other,
Yeah.
different enough and complement each other. And for anybody wanting to know, it was the uh,
Professional learning.
Acadia Professional Learning. Yeah. It was a really fantastic environment, and they really did exceed our expectations as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm teaching now at the university level, a different course altogether, but I'm leveraging a lot of my learnings from taking their class in my own teaching. So
That's
it's been very
fantastic.
helpful. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Um, Tell us about your experiences with the practicum, because you know our first um uh what do you call him,
Observation.
observation, the first gentleman we observed, he had BPD, and he was a verbal processor. And so for people who don't know, when you have a journey, you can be as internal and quiet. That's the way I am. Holly is a verbal processor. She talks a lot. This guy processed so much stuff out loud. Like, everybody who was observing in the room was crying multiple times. It was just beautiful. Um, what was it like with your clients there?
Mhm.
And if there's anything you want to share about clients that you've had since then, it
Yeah.
would be cool to hear about that.
Yeah, I think by and large, the people I've facilitated are tend to be inward looking. And um, one of my observations with the training, the guy was very much verbal and kept being verbal. And the facilitator that we were with very just what's the word I'm looking for? Adeptly, like got him to go inward. And she just nudged him gently. She said, I think now might be the time to kind of just lay back and put on an eye mask and just be quiet for a little while and see what happens. And that once she did that, he went in and he did his journey. At the end of it, on the reflection, he said that was a very helpful nudge from her, because he felt there was an expectation that he should be talking.
Mm.
And so he kept talking. So he was worried about the expectation of the people in the room with him.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's a note to myself too. And I'm kind of very, very aware of that with the people I'm helping with their journeys, is like, as soon as I can, very gently get them to stop talking. I'm happy to write anything down you need me to write down at the time, but it doesn't need to be a complete stream of consciousness the entire journey. And so the across the board in each of the journeys I've facilitated, there does come a moment, and I don't even know how to really explain it, but there's definitely an energy change in the room when I think the crux of the journey is going on. It's palpable. And I think when I was in observation with the crew I was with, there was one lady we were talking, or not talking to. She was journeying, and there was a moment where the energy in the room changed. And all of us kind of looked at each other like, whoa, what was that? And then that's when she started to get extremely emotional. And, basically when she came out and told us what was going on, was talking to her grandparents.
Oh, wow.
And it was that moment and her grandparents raised her. And so there was this moment where all of us could feel like something was happening, and we just sat and observed. And afterwards she's like, yeah, this is what happened. And so there's these just really intense moments that happen on these journeys for folks. And I don't know whether there's any words to convey what it is, but when it's happening.
I think for me, being a verbal processor and working with people during preparation, I do spend time letting them know whatever way they need to process their journey, that is fine. If they are naturally a verbal processor, and that's what comes forward, that's okay. Because for me, being a verbal processor, I almost need to say things because I'm afraid I'm going to forget what just happened. Or it almost is my way of thinking, so that it launches me into the next portion of whatever the mushroom has to teach me. And so letting people know, like, if you're not a natural verbal processor, that is the way I want you to do this journey. Be completely internal, and I'm good. But if there's anything you need me to write down, like you said, we can do that. And you're right, there is this shift when they go in and out of those kind of depths of being internal, and you do kind of come back up for a minute. It's like coming up for a big breath of air, and then you're like, okay, and you get back to work, is kind of what it feels like to me. You can sense that energy fluctuation in the room, and it's actually so beautiful to watch, no matter what their experience and their kind of output is. If they have an emotional release or what have you, it's really like a beautiful experience that these clients ask us to be a part of, to keep them safe through, to guide them through anything that may seem challenging, with love and curiosity and open acceptance. And these are really powerful healing journeys that people are having, and that we've all had.
Yeah, and just how fortunate we are to actually be in a position to be a part of that. And I think it's something that we shouldn't lose sight of.
Yeah. So you mentioned nudging, which is a great word, because when people are under the influence of psilocybin, they are nudgeable. And so I facilitated for a friend, and he came out and he started talking to me, and I listened to what he had to say, and I said, I think you still have more time to go back internal. And And so he just put on his eye mask again, and he was gone, processing more trauma and exploring his, inner healing intelligence. And,
Mhm.
or it can be just as simple as, putting your hand on their shoulder, and that regrounds them and whatever they're doing, or just reminding them of something that they wanted to explore that they
Yep.
mentioned before their journey, which we call intentions. So reminding them of what their intentions were. What have you experienced in with regard to nudging?
Very similar. I think by and large, I've been able to use more of a verbal nudge. Like well, I think it's funny because it depends on the person, but I would
Mhm.
say if I were to try to generalize, verbal nudges tend to work the best.
Mhm.
Just acknowledging what they're saying, assuring them that I'm capturing it in the notes, and I will share the notes at the end of the session.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, and then if I feel like they kind of, especially if they start to repeat, then I say, why don't you go ahead and lay back? I'm here to listen, but why don't you lay back down for a little bit, be quiet, breathe for a bit, and see. And then if you still feel compelled that you need to talk more, I'm here. But as soon as you kind of nudge them back into kind of going inward, they typically go back inward.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah. So something that's really, to let the listeners know what's happening. Um, in Oregon, the only legal way to do facilitation is to go to a service center where there's a licensed facilitator, and to go through a prep process, the administration day, and
Yep.
then integration. And you're lucky enough to have friends who have their own service center, and now you're um, working there. Tell us about that location,
Yeah.
and you know anything that the listeners might want to know if they wanted to go to Ashland and work with
Yeah.
you. What is
Yeah.
that like?
Well, I mean, yes, and I'm actually affiliated with a service center in Portland as well.
Oh, nice.
Um, but the one here in Ashland, I think is a really special space because the folks that own it, Brian and Michelle, have done a really amazing job making a really beautiful space. Um, and so I don't remember how many rooms it has exactly, but it's a lot like going to a spa, frankly. And then the building that they've been able to find and has an atrium in the middle with a Japanese garden. So it's one of the only service centers I've seen that actually has that. So as people are kind of coming out of their journeys and they're still needing to stay in the service center, which by law is required for the listeners that haven't experienced things in Oregon, there are time limits based on the size of the dose that you take. But for those kind of the waning part of the journey where you're much more aware and you're kind of coming back to yourself, the atrium there is a perfect place for people to sit and observe nature and kind of be
Beautiful.
plugged into a really beautiful place. So
Wow.
it's a very special location, and
Wow.
I highly
And
recommend.
just to clarify, minimum time frames. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
that sounds gorgeous.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what do you have going on in Portland?
In Portland, it's an it's a service center that you all know.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been in touch with them, and I've gotten to know the owner. And I'm going to be doing the same type of work, but up there. So really focused on
Perfect.
corporate trauma and creativity.
Mhm.
Um,
Perfect.
and yeah, just
Awesome.
it's obviously a much larger population base. But I think what's different is in Portland, a lot of the clientele come from Portland.
Mhm.
In Ashland, a lot of the clientele, almost all of them, come from outside of Oregon.
Hmm.
Okay.
So it's a different demographic and maybe even a little bit different of a strategy.
Mhm.
Um, so
Oh, that's cool to know.
And are we
yeah.
talking about like people just driving up for California, or are we talking about from all over?
No, from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
That's
And
fantastic.
obviously that might have some changes with some of the legal changes that are coming down the pike, because I've heard something about they may restrict the ability of international visitors to
Oh,
participate in psilocybin in Oregon. But I think that would be a really terrible idea, frankly.
Right. I can't imagine that passing,
yeah.
because most of
Yeah,
the people who are advocating really are, for all humans
yeah,
and their
exactly.
healing.
Let's we'll see what happens with the
Yeah,
kind of the overall
yeah.
legislative initiatives that are happening. But to that end, like getting involved is important for folks like us. We should be
Mhm.
entering into the comment sessions and whatnot, so they
Yeah,
can
I love that you brought that up. I do think that um, facilitators, service center owners, growers, service center employees all should be in on the conversation. We have these dreams and goals and whatnot that we want all humans to be able to access the ability to journey, and the more voices that come together, that's when we see real change happen. So
absolutely.
I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I'm going through my master's in social work right now, and
Nice.
um, learning so that I can become a therapist. And I'm learning about social justice and advocacy and just how important that is. And so I'm sure I'll be a social justice warrior before it's over and doing all that
Hope
I
you
can
already
to
are.
help people. Oh, working on it. I mean, doing a podcast to get the information out there is just part of it. So that's part of the reason we're excited to get this going.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things like coming through this journey to date is kind of my own perception. And I think it's something that in being in this work, we just have to be constantly aware of it, is how people perceive it. Um, there's definitely a contingent in the community that I would call, I hate to use it sounds pejorative, and I don't mean it in a pejorative fashion, but it's the woo-woo faction, the folks that are real, it's all about the mysticism,
Hmm.
and that's fine. But there's a significant amount of the population that turns off immediately if that's the conversation. And what I've been able to find is my own community or tribe, whatever you want to call them, of people that can appreciate that. And again, no slight, no, it's all love, but to access and get people that actually need the help. There's people that are maybe a little more pragmatic, I guess is the
Hmm.
word I would use, in the way that they approach this. And that's one of the things I appreciate about what the folks here in Ashland at Omnia are doing, is it feels like,
Mhm.
it's real. It's about healing. It's about
Mhm. Yeah,
um, helping.
yeah.
So
So in this journey process, we've talked a lot about like experiences in the administration session and kind of um the sorts of issues that are nearer to your heart,
mm,
people you want to work with. But tell us a little bit about how you prepare your clients before, and what that integration or follow-up period looks like after.
yeah. So my prep sessions are structured kind of with, there's that initial intake to make sure we both feel, meaning my client and I both feel that this is the right thing to do, and that, we have a certain connection that feels right. Um, so once that initial screening happens, then it's about making sure they understand the legal and operational context of how everything is going to work, because there's a lot of paperwork, and making sure they understand why that paperwork is here is really important.
Mhm.
Um, so that first prep session is really starting to go down the path of understanding intent on why they're reaching out to do this in the first place,
Mhm.
and then B, starting to collect the information we need
Mhm.
from a legal perspective with the state of Oregon, and making sure they understand why we're asking those types of questions. Um, and then it's a kind of a balance between those two things going forward. It's like the intent side of it and the administrative side of it. The second session is much more about what they should expect the day of, kind of touching base again on the intent side of things, helping them visualize what a journey might be like metaphorically. So there's this, have you heard of the pearl dive metaphor? I'll share it with you afterwards, but it's a super helpful thing where you think that you're diving for pearls. So there's the first bit of getting acclimated to the water, and then you go deeper and you find the oysters and you start to crack them open and you start to find those pearls of insight. And then you gather them. And then as you start to come up, you can start to look and see what you have so you can start to process what it means. So it's a useful metaphor to kind of help people think about what it's like to go through the administration session. We also then talk about set and setting, which is of paramount importance for a journey. So we talk about things like what the room will be like. Are they susceptible to hot or cold? Do they want any kind of scent in the room or not? Or, the use of music, the use of ceremony, having them bring kind of an amulet or something from their lives that helps them focus on why they're there, all of that kind of stuff to make sure that the day of they understand what they're in for. And then I can also make sure that everything's set up for them to be ultimately extremely comfortable and feeling extremely safe. And then we do the administration. And like I mentioned already, I'm there to take a lot of notes. I'm there to help guide them back in. I'm there should anything negative happen, which so far, knock on wood, nothing has. And the integration I do with it, hopefully within the next, I usually try to do it the next day, if at all possible, with a long guided walk through nature. And again, being in Southern Oregon, we're really lucky because we kind of have our choice of where we would want to go. And it's a conversation primarily focused on them, with me kind of asking guiding questions about.
So you take a walk with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Take a walk with them. And then, we have, Omnia's got a really nice program where they have ongoing integration for people that have done journeys with them. And it's like almost like a user community where I think it's every month.
That's a really great idea. Yeah.
We rotate facilitators and are available for anyone to kind of jump on and help them with further integration of what they've experienced.
That's wonderful, because some journeys can be fairly
revealing,
focused.
Yeah.
I'd say you might come out with like one or two very solid things. You may have been opened up to areas in your life where you're not practicing self-love or what have you. And then some journeys are in depth and there's a lot to process, and they may not understand why they visualized what they visualized, or something that was revealed to them, or even repressed memories that may have come forward that they're confused about, or a number of things. And so I think it is incredibly powerful to have ongoing integration. And, one thing I know from clients that I facilitated and in my own journey is you can get a couple of months down the road and all of a sudden something comes forward and you're like, whoa, wow.
Yeah.
What is this? Where did this come from? I need to process this. And so knowing that you have a community to go back to then process these new insights is actually incredibly valuable to have.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important as facilitators not to skip the integration. Like the integration is actually one of the most important pieces of the whole puzzle.
Right.
But then also being available. And so the people I work with, I make sure they understand, like, I'm still here, still happy to chat. I do follow-up messages just to check in, see how everyone's doing. And I think that's an really important part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Before we move away from preparation, we know that you're a guy who loves music a lot,
Yeah.
and music is an important part. Tell us about how music plays a role in this, and if you've got any nuggets of wisdom for folks who are going into a journey.
Yeah. So, music is extremely important, but it's also, at least in my own experience, it's just one aspect of the overall journey. And I think what it does is it, just because of the way psilocin works in the brain and kind of firing up all of the brain at the same time, having that audio is extremely helpful. And when I talk to people afterwards, they're like, when the music was on, I could see the colors of the music and that kind of, so there's these connections that happen in the brain. And so I think it's really important for it to be part of the journey. But that being said, it needs to be much more on the ambient side of things. I steer clear of music with any kind of words or lyrics. Anything that's too aggressive sounding, I shy away from. So it tends to be kind of much more of an ambient kind of sound to it.
Yeah.
And always make sure that the person I'm facilitating, that they have veto power at all times. So it's like if there's a piece of music that's bothering them as they're on the journey, all they have to do is say, "Hey, Steve, skip this,
Right.
please."
Right.
And I'll skip it. I mean, I pay attention because I have a playlist that I use, and I pay attention if there's a consistent piece of feedback of like, okay, this thing's annoying me, then it just gets removed from the playlist.
Great.
Going forward. But yeah, music's important, and but it's a part of the bigger puzzle. It's like you want to have because of the visual stimulus that you're getting, and the I think the audio stimulus is also important.
Yeah. Can you let's go back to administration day. There'll be people watching this that have no idea what a journey level dose is and what it's like to go to
Yeah.
a service center. Can you just kind of walk through the steps of the day?
Yeah, so let's start with dosing. For people who are psychedelically naive, i.e., and naive not in a negative context, in a hey, I haven't really done this before context. I recommend right around 24 milligrams to make sure that you have a journey. I think above that, you start to get into what someone explained, you get kind of the whiteout. So if people take too big of a dose, they sometimes don't really remember the experience, kind of gets erased. So psychedelically naive, I would start with 24. I highly recommend the people I'm working with to have a booster available should they need it. And that's usually like 12, an extra 12 milligrams if we need it. The way it works on the day of is we highly recommend not to eat a big, heavy breakfast beforehand, but maybe just a light toast, an egg, and a glass of tea or something. If you're on medication, take your medication that day, just like you would any day. We typically start sessions right around noon, and you come to the center. We orient you with where everything is so that you understand how the whole building kind of works together. We show where the bathrooms are. We show where emergency exits are. All that they get introduced to the people that work at the center, and the people that work at the center are the ones that actually supply the mushrooms, because we don't. And then we settle into the room, and I recommend tea. I think it's just a much more pleasurable experience, but some people prefer to eat the whole fruit or take capsules. But the tea, I find there's a certain kind of moment where just because of the way tea works for humans, it's a moment to reflect, to center, and to kind of enjoy ginger, because it's basically ginger tea with some psilocybin in it, right? So it's actually a really pleasurable experience to kind of sit and center, and the music gets going. We can't have lit candles in Ashland because of the fire dangers that we have in this part of the world. Right. So we typically have like a I use a Tibetan singing bowl to kind of say, okay, the tea is done. I have the client ring the bell to kind of say we're now into a new space.
Mhm.
And I have them settle in and get comfortable. And they want to draw, or if they have a notebook that they want to write in, until, we start to see the signs that they're starting to feel the effects of the mushrooms. And then once they start feeling the effects of the mushrooms, it's all about them being comfortable and going inward. And I sit quietly, ready to take notes, make sure the music isn't disruptive. Yeah. And I do a lot of kind of just my own reflection and notebook writing at that time.
So yeah, with the dosing, I think it's great to point out there. Do you remember the doctor that we were listening to this morning? His name? There's a summit happening right now, 3-day summit.
Oh, Fadiman.
Fadiman, where they're interviewing doctors and scientists and just really delving deep into the psychedelic world, and everything that's come from essentially there's the spiritual conversations, historical conversation, and how that influences our modern day. But there's also from the time, science began investigating psychedelics, and how once psychedelics became, considered a Schedule One substance,
Yeah.
how the movement went underground because there were massive um, mental health changes for the positive happening, and there were therapists and doctors and scientists not willing to give that up, so it all went underground. And so from all of this research from the 60s until now, there's a lot of data to support that a hero dose, which is above 30 milligrams, really doesn't, for most people, produce better or more results than anywhere, in that standard level.
4 to 30.
Yeah. And so I think that's important to note. In Oregon, we can administer up to 50 milligrams, which we might do if somebody was on SSRIs, depression medications, serotonin, anything that attaches to your serotonin receptors, because we know psilocin works in those serotonin receptors. And so we kind of have to work with and kind of play with those SSRIs. Somebody's 45 milligram dose may be the same as another person's 25 milligram dose based on those medications. Yeah, I like that you pointed out that they could take their medications, kind of where you land with dosing. And then this is a funny question I think a lot of people have. I had it. But when it comes to service centers, you mentioned showing them where the bathroom is. And I really like to point out that, yes, like you can use the bathroom, you get to use it by yourself. Like, it may be an interesting experience, but fear not. We will guard the door for you, and you have privacy in the areas where all humans have the right to privacy. So thank you for taking us through your day.
Sure.
And kind of what the administration is like. I love that, you signaled the kind of the start of the journey with those Tibetan singing bowls. There's something that feels very symbolic about that, and that reflection time I think is so important before they really start to feel the medicine. They can reflect on their intentions and just get their mind into that place. They can breathe through any maybe anxiety they might be feeling if they're psychedelic naive, which I was before my first healing journey. So I know what that feels like when you need that time to kind of ground yourself. And so yeah, thank you for taking us through that.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And Oregon has done a great job of trying to be as transparent as possible. There's a whole lot of forms that people have to fill out, and ethical considerations are really important. Um, there's things we talk about like supportive touch. We have to address the potential of sexual energy. tell us about that and how that works in your practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. So happy to provide assistive touch as needed. And by definition, that's a hand on the shoulder, holding a hand, I think, or touching the feet. Is that right?
Yeah. Or
Any
a
other,
hug.
or a
Yeah.
hug. Yeah. The rest of it's, nope. So I'm very clear with that as part of the preparation sessions. Like this is this. And also just to be very clear, like the decision is ultimately the client's, and they can change their mind all the way up until the point they actually drink the tea.
Mhm.
So if they say they want it, they can revoke it. And then I think they can revoke it any time, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can revoke it any time, but you can't change your mind if you say no. If you say no, then you're no until forever.
Right.
And you can't say yes once you've taken the tea. So I just make
Yeah.
sure they understand that
Mhm.
that is the structure within which we have to work. And
Mm-hmm.
I very firmly and politely make sure they understand how that works. Um,
Mhm.
and then, the sexual feelings and the sexual nature, all feelings are welcome. But I think as a facilitator, you need to guide them away from those feelings pretty resolutely. To say, hey, these are okay feelings, but why don't you go back inward and do a bit more of your journey? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, that's true, because it's just a type of energy. There's many types of energy that exist in this world that humans generate, right? There's creative energy, there's sexual energy, there is joyful energy, there's wisdom.
yeah,
There's energy in all different experiences. And so there's no shame in sexual energy. It's not super common among clients, but occasionally it can happen.
yeah,
And it's a place where the whole person is accepted and welcomed. And in our training, we learned the techniques to redirect sexual energy, because the last thing that any person needs to feel is shame over something that is
right,
completely natural and normal. And
100%.
so, yeah, being able to just redirect back internal just prevents any sort of shame. And there may be pieces of that energy that comes from what it is that they're processing and working through. And so we
Absolutely.
can't stop the healing process from happening just because there's been too many messages of shame around that specific type of energy. It's
For
more
sure.
just a redirect into a healing and helpful path.
Hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about self-care. So self-care is something I think that a whole lot of people don't know anything about. And I think that's true because I'll ask friends, like, what do you do for self care? And I'll get a, you know, deer in the headlights look like, what does that even mean? Um, with therapists, with psilocybin facilitators, self care is important because of the fact that we are helping people with some intense stuff. And so our own self-care is important there, plus just naturally as human beings self-care is important, and then self-care is important moving forward after a psychedelic journey into the integration where you can really solidify those insights that you gained.
Hmm.
So what are your thoughts on self-care?
So what's interesting is even in a community of facilitators, we're all really shit at it. That was no, frankly, like the topic of conversation in a group that I go to. We're talking about it, and we're all really not great at it. So I think just by our natures, we struggle with it because from a young age we're taught not to be quote unquote selfish. And then if you have any kind of empathic bone in your body, you always put yourself behind other people in terms of priorities. And so
Mm-hmm.
it does take a concerted effort to kind of break free from that kind of training. And even for people that are in this work, they still struggle with it. So I think it's something that actually requires a bit of strategy and a bit of planning to make sure that you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, self-care can be all kinds of different things. But for me, it's about I need my alone time where I'm not around other people to
Mm-hmm.
kind of fill up the batteries, I guess. So that's like things like hikes, bike rides, long drives. So
Mhm.
that I make so what I'll do is I teach. It's a 2.5 hour drive from here each direction, and on those drives, those are my kind of moments to listen to the podcasts that I want to listen to. Sometimes I'll even veer off of the freeway and take the back roads, um,
Mhm.
and try to find beautiful places I haven't seen before. So that's kind of my version of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Love that.
I can't stress enough getting enough sleep, something that as a species we seem to prioritize less and less, but
Mm-hmm.
um, sleep is so incredibly important. And I think for those that are considering this type of work, like if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't possibly help other people.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Like they say, putting on your own oxygen mask before putting on somebody else's.
100%. And so I think taking those moments and time for oneself are really important. I also, like every morning, I have a whole ritual around. This sounds silly, but as I get older, I want to make sure my brain continues to function as
Like,
well as it
well,
can. So I do puzzles, and I do Duolingo Spanish. Um, and that's a daily thing that I make sure I prioritize. And
Mhm.
yeah, so every moment that I can, I try to refocus on things that I need to do for me.
Awesome.
So you just mentioned Duolingo, which brought back to mind the critical period after a journey. So 3 to 4 weeks afterward, our brains are more open. There's
Yep.
neuroplasticity going on. We can learn things better than we did before. And one of the things that's been brought up is it's a easier time to learn a language, which I was never good at all. Um, I barely passed my Spanish classes in college. So, um, have you have you found that the critical period is a good time for Duolingo or anything else specifically for you, or do you have things that you like to encourage people to do during the critical period?
That's a good question. I haven't. I believe I believe that could be true. Have I noticed it personally? No, but I also haven't been looking for it.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's about the learning side of it as much as it is about the wisdom that's revealed in the journey
Hmm.
has an interesting way of continuously showing up, especially for that first 4 weeks after the journey. You'll get like these reminders
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and they always make me laugh,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of like for me, it's like the universe just kind of poking you and saying, I'm still
Mm-hmm.
right here." So I
Mm-hmm.
think in that regard, yes, but what
Yeah.
skill acquisition and that kind of stuff, I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that it could be true, but personally haven't focused on that
Mm-hmm.
side
Sure.
of it.
I love that. And I had a poke yesterday, actually. And it wasn't something that was shared with us, or it wasn't my part of my journey. It was shared with us as a part of someone else's journey. And but the the piece that was shared just spurred some reconnecting in me that I hadn't realized I had drifted so far away from, through through someone else's story. And then yesterday, even though it's been a couple of months, I was reminded of it, and that I feel, that I'm drifting a bit again. There was a bluebird on our fence, and I haven't seen this bluebird in months.
Hmm?
And it was, I don't know, I just sat for a minute, and I really felt it in my heart, and it actually makes me a little emotional, so I'm going to stop
Yeah,
talking about it. But
yeah,
but it was actually a really wonderful little poke, and it filled my heart. It made me smile. It made me look internal. it was a great little reminder from the universe. So you're right.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's what I think is the most salient for me is it's like the pokes where you're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
it's very easy to get caught back up in all the turmoil of modern life and
Yeah.
forget some of the learnings
Exactly.
Mhm.
unless you're paying
Um,
it.
oh, yes, sir.
Well, we've got a few minutes left, and
Sure.
I was curious. Let's think about the future. What are you excited
Mm.
about for psilocybin in general, or uh, your own path on this journey, or anything to do with legalization? What are you hopeful or excited for?
So I'm hopeful that we don't lose the progress that we've been able to make in Oregon,
Mm-hmm.
in getting this to be much more of an accepted part of healing. So I guess I'm guardedly optimistic about what's going on in Colorado, although I hear some things that give me pause at times around how they're looking to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think Oregon has been very intentful about how they've done all of this to make sure that we're focusing in on those healing aspects of it rather than the fun aspects of it, I guess I would say, the
Mm-hmm.
recreational aspects. Not that there's anything wrong with the recreational aspects at all, but I think it's very easy for that progress to get shut down if it's just purely a recreational,
Right.
as you know, politics change and those types of
Mm-hmm.
things. So I think
Yeah.
I
Would,
worry about that, but I'm still optimistic that
mm-hmm.
we've made significant progress in Oregon on that front.
Mm-hmm.
I keep waiting to read the headline that the VA says that they're going to approve this for PTSD for our returning soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they have the chutzpah to do it. I know there's plenty of people within the VA that think that it should be. So let's hope that it doesn't fall victim to politics,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
because I
Yeah,
think
a
that would
couple weeks
open.
ago they said not yet on the MDMA for PTSD, and so they're still working on it. Um,
But in other countries,
yeah,
they
yeah.
said yes.
In the Netherlands, they saw the same results, and they were every looks good.
I
Let's
mean, I
do
think
it.
that's kind of the hypocrisy of the whole thing. The FDA approves pharmaceuticals with much less supporting evidence of efficacy than what we've already been able to show with the efficacy of psilocybin in these circumstances. So to me,
Yeah.
there's just still overcoming this dogma
Mm-hmm.
that it's a dangerous drug on the scale of heroin or cocaine is just stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just pure politics,
Yeah, it's not
unfortunately.
scientifically proven.
It's not,
Yeah.
there's no base in science at
Mm-hmm.
all in how
Gotcha.
that was decided.
Yeah.
So so that's the kind of stuff I think about. And in terms of me
Mm-hmm.
personally, I'm excited to see where this practice goes for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that I can help as many people as I can,
Mm-hmm.
frankly.
So on that note, if people would like to work with you, where can they find out more about your work? Where can they get in contact with you?
Yeah. So really simple. I have a website that's still a work in progress because it's one of those things that I hate doing, but
Yeah.
it's called integratus.work.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, integratus.work. And then my email is Stephen with a V, C Boswell, Boswell at Gmail. And I'm happy to help anyone that's looking for some help or even just general questions about this whole thing.
That's awesome. Is there anything that we didn't cover that who'd like to share?
Can't think of anything. I think the more we can get the word out, the more that people can see that there are, I would call psilocybin pragmatists. We're out here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to make sure people get the word that there is help and there are things that can actually help them process some of the bad things that they may have gone through in their life.
Nice. Well, thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys. It's good to
Love
see
having
you.
you on here, man.
Yeah, love being here.
Cool.
See you soon.
Awesome.
Yeah. See you
All right.
soon.
Thanks, Steve.